Yo guys, welcome back to another Danmachi Memoria Freese video. Okay, it's another Monday, which means it's another tier list. Now, if you hadn't guessed by now, I'm sort of running out of elements here. I've got one to go, and the reason it went in the order it did is because I was holding out on Earth and Dark, hoping there would be like some sort of Halloween celebration banner, but WFS look like they're doing things in a bit of a wonky order. But anyway, so another tier list. So I probably should go over the rules and stipulations for the tier list. Okay, this tier list prioritizes content other than wargame. So if a unit is good in wargame, those those benefits do not value as highly on these tier lists. Okay, so I'll put that out there at first. And given a couple of comments that I've had across some of these tier lists, I should say that I'm only ranking units that are currently available on EU. Why? Because EU is, well, not as old as JP or NA, so if I've missed any units here, chances are they're a bit older than a lot of the other units here, which means they probably wouldn't have ranked that highly anyway, with the exception of a few. Now, if I have missed a few in the process of any of these tier lists, please drop in the comments, let me know, and I will find out all I can for them and then update the tier list. Anyway, once this is all said and done, the tier list is posted, or will be posted, a couple of days after the video has been published in my Discord, so feel free to drop in and check out those tier lists at any time. Now, let's get into the video. You can already see D tier. I'm pretty sure we're cool. Like, there's no one that's going to disagree with me. Like, don't get me wrong, the Kino is, you know what, let me just start with the Lily, and I mean the Bikini Lily. Okay, the reason she is in D tier is she has no hero ascension at all. You can limit break her, but her stats are terrible without hero ascension anyway. But she does have, now keep in mind, saying that she may have terrible stats and no ascension is even possible for her, but she does have earth resistance debuffs, one as an AoE, which is minus 30%, and the other as a single target, which is minus 40%. Now, the reason she's in D tier is because, well, we already have that sort of level of support out there with units that have way better stats and do way more damage and have way more utility. But if you're missing out on the element resistance debuff, she's probably the best sack unit for you. Moving over, now you know how I do this. I give a couple of honorable mentions in the D tier to cover why they're in there. Now, although the Kino has okay stats, I won't say they're terrible, but they're okay. He doesn't really provide anything. Like, all of his utility is in his SA, which is physical resistant, earth resist minus 35%, but doesn't bring much else to the team. Like, he has strength and magic minus 35%, but we already have that with Harihime and way better. But saying that, I know the rules are it's compare it to units within the element. I just don't, he doesn't carry enough damage or utility, even with his okay stats, the warrant being in anything except D tier. I will quickly cover the other Lily as well. I do feel like she deserves a bit of a mention, seeing as she does buff earth damage by 30% and lowers enemy buffs by 2 turns. Other than that, I don't really think she's all that great, because the utility that she has, I mean, she lowers dexterity and agility. Basically, she's designed for wargame entirely. The only thing good about her are her stats are okay, and she buffs magic and earth damage. Now, it's mainly the earth damage because we all know we have the ability to buff magic and strength higher than 30% anyway. So saying that, we're going to move on to the D tier. Okay, so we're in the D tier, and I feel like there's a couple more to mention than there usually would be. Like, some of you are like, why is Asfi there? Now, the reason Asfi's here is because, well, her stats, obviously, she only recently got released, so her stats are going to be okay, but the problem is she's a balanced type, which means her stats are balanced, which means she's not going to be very good at putting out damage. And if you hadn't guessed by now, this list prioritizes damage over defense. That's just the way it is, because I feel like you can recuperate enough defensive stuff like buffs and strategies with assists, so it's not that necessary with most of your adventurers. She does, however, bring a buttload of defensive utility, but because she has no damage to go along with it, like she lowers incoming damage by 35% on her skill 1 from AoE and single target, She also has a 30% HP heal and a 20% guard buff on her skill 1 as well. She does have a super modifier AoE on her skill 2 and lowers allies debuffs, but she's not going to do no damage regardless of what the fact that she has 2 super modifiers. She's not going to do any damage. That's why she's in C tier. So she has defensive utility, a lot of defensive utility, and then no damage because her stats are basically terrible. Kino, I know a lot of people probably didn't expect this Kino to be here, but she actually isn't that old. I'm pretty sure she came out with the rerun that came out this year. She is a few months old, but I wouldn't say old enough to have been power crept out of being useful at all. She does have more self utility than anything else, but she buffs her element damage. So she does have 2 percentage modifiers on her skill 2 and skill 3, which means she's going to hit pretty decently, and she does buff her own guard, counter, crit and earth attack, so she just needs to be buffed with her damage type. She is another one that's designed for war games, but she's literally just designed for damage. She has no team utility whatsoever. The Lithia is a different story entirely. Now, I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, C tier does not mean this Lithia is bad. Her SA alone has a minus 50% earth resistance, so that's fantastic. The problem is, she, in terms of team utility, she only lowers debuffs by 2 turns and nothing else. She buffs her own magic and earth damage for 3 turns, which is fantastic. The other problem is she has no super modifiers whatsoever, so I don't think that really warrants her being higher than C tier. And then if we come across next to her, we have Shizu. Now, Shizu hasn't really, I mean, I won't say he's fantastic, let's be honest, he is in C tier. His stats are okay. They're not triple S, they're just a little bit below that. He obviously is a little bit older, so you have to expect that, but he too has a minus 50% earth resist debuff on his SA. He is unfortunately single target only. He does have a super modifier. He does have a percentage based modifier on his super modifier as well, so he will hit considerably hard, and he also buffs his own earth damage. So I mean, no, sorry, he buffs his own strength, crit and earth damage by 50%. Now, ignore the fact that we can buff our own strength outside of that, you know, using other means. He still buffs his own crit and earth damage by 50% and has a super modifier with an additional, I mean, albeit it's only a 15% damage modifier on his skill 1. You know what, I actually will show you guys what as I'm reading here. Let me just bring this up for you. Okay, if you can see here, like his skill 1 is a super modifier and the percentage additional is only 15%. Like some units we have now have like up to 50% damage modifier on their skills, but he does buff his own strength, crit and earth damage here, so he still is going to hit, you know, decently in my opinion. Other than that, the others, the Ryu here, I'm going to skip the Alan because Alan's not he's good, he's not fantastic. That's my whole thing there. He's good, he's not fantastic. Ryu has subpar utility. That's it. She does hit decently well, but she has subpar utility, and Galmus is basically full defense utility and pretty much nothing more. So we're going to move on to B tier. Okay, this is where it gets a little bit, I have to spend a little bit more time explaining. Now, this B tier is something, you know what, I'll actually bring it up and we can go over the units together. If we can look at the Alfred here, let's buff him up, shall we? And then we 100% SA gauge charge on his SA, which is great, which means you can always bring him in as the last unit on a Record Buster Earth team. He is single target, which means he's going to hit hard anyway. It has a much larger multiplier than the AoE. He buffs his team's strength, dexterity and earth damage by 30%. Now, I would say 30% is the standard across the board. We have been recently given utility that's higher than 30%, but I would still say 30% is basically that line of quality assurance. Like if it's below 30%, I wouldn't consider it good, I would consider it subpar, which is why Ryu is in C tier. But carrying on, he also has a debuff of physical resist and earth resist minus 20%. Now that is subpar in itself, but when you add the fact that he increases single target damage by 20% on top of that, this whole skill reeks of amazing utility, even for single target. Now this is his only downside as well. They are subpar stats. It is only 20%, but you know, because of that, because of being that, and because of being single target is what the reason he's in B tier and not A tier. If he had like an AoE on there, I mean, he also doesn't. Oh, okay, he does have a super modifier. I was gonna say he doesn't have a super modifier on it on his skill 2 or skill 3. He also extends buffs and enemy debuffs by 1 turn, which is all great. So he has a decent amount of utility, a good amount of damage, but the utility is of a you know, lower percentage, but it's inclusive to have enough in there. So B tier is where I felt comfortable putting him. Now, who is next? Let's have a look here. So we have the new Laluna. And we're going to go over why she's B tier actually. So obviously she's new, so her stats are going to be fine. Like triple S magic, always great. I mean, magic always having that that added weight of being slower than physical units is a thing, but then magic hits really hard anyway. So her SA is an AoE. It is designed for wargame. The problem is she only buffs herself. There's no team utility there, which obviously pulls back her worth or value, so to speak. She does get additionals, which means she's always going to have a decent amount of damage regardless, even if you put her on a mixed damage type team. Again, skill 2, it's an AoE, it's a fast modifier, which means she's always going to get her buffs off regardless, but they are self buffs. This is what I'm saying. She's missing a lot of team utility. She's a very independent unit, and on top of that, she does have a super modifier here, so she is going to hit hard. Don't worry, I'm not getting twisted. Like, she has a great super modifier on here, so she's going to hit crazy hard with that. It's just she doesn't bring enough to the team to be higher than a B tier. Okay, Gareth. Now, Gareth shocked me. Like, I got more Gareths than I wanted to when I pulled for him. We're gonna throw him MLB up here in the album. That triple S strength stat, his stats across the board are really, really good, and you would expect that given that he's an anniversary unit. His SA is something. His SA is a bit meh, right? I don't really rate defensive. I mean, to be fair, this is the only defensive SA that I'm aware of, except I don't mean like, I mean not including heals or heal. Oh, bruv. When I get self-conscious about how I speak, it turns into a nightmare for me. So we're just gonna brush over that and pretend I didn't say it like that. Anyway, this is the only SA I know that increases physical and magic resistance. It's a lot. It's a large increase. I just think meh. Allies fast Earth. I mean, this right here, Earth attack damage plus 50% for 5 turns. Amazing, amazing. Especially given that a lot of the higher ranked or higher tier units on this list require someone else to buff their own Earth elemental damage. Well, I say a lot of, some of. The only drawback here is that the 75% chance to nullify physical attacks. Now, the problem with that is, although it gives you more survivability, if you nullify an attack, you don't counter and you lose out on a lot of damage. And he gets 3 of those, which means that you could potentially, based on RNG, be put back by a few turns just because you didn't counter as much. Super modifier AoE, this does a lot. This is where it shocked me, because he does a lot of damage with this skill, like a lot of damage. And he removes allies' strength and magic debuffs, which means for me, this is a really underrated bit of utility, because I mean, especially I use in my dark 7 zone team, I will take the Goblin Slayer Ahmed, because she removes debuffs as well, which means that my Otal, like my dark Otal, can be constantly non-restrained when he does damage, and this alone, it can increase your damage output by so much, especially if you're against an enemy that lowers your damage output by 25%. Now it's like, come on, that's 25% of the damage you could be doing. Removing that, crazy. But it also hits really hard. This is what shocked me. I was expecting him to just be a tank, but he does hit hard. The only drawback for me is most of this is defensive utility, with the exception of his skill 2 removing debuffs, which is why I've left him in the tier that he's in. Yuri. Now, Yuri may be a little bit older, but Yuri is up there. Yuri has held his own. Now, I know Yuri is a single target user. Like, his stats are not that bad. Like, the double S, ignore the fact that it's a double S, it's still just below 2k. Like, that's still crazy. And his SA like lowers physical resist by 50%. For a long time, that was the max, right? Buffs his own strength and earth damage by 50%. He is a self-sufficient damage type, but this is the thing. He increases his own element damage and type damage, and then lowers the resistances for his element type and guard rate as well. But so all you need is someone to lower physical resistance. I was about to say bruv, by the way, you know. I like to try and be more articulated when I'm doing these videos. If you hear me in real life, actually, I've got like terrible mouth. I cuss, I swear. It's if you've been to my live streams, you probably know. And then his skill 3 removes magic. But this is the problem. This is why he's in a lower tier than he is. 1, he has no AoE, and 2, he only removes magic buffs. If he removed strength and magic buffs, sorry, I do have a little bit of a sore throat, by the way, then I would consider him to be a lot higher up than he is. And considering his age, he's held the test of time quite well. Okay, so we're coming over to A tier now, and I know what some of you guys are going to be thinking. Oh, Asher, A tier, what are you thinking? There's a reason for this, okay? Now we're going to jump into the game again. I'm going to show you, we're going to go over this. She doesn't have triple S strength. In fact, her strength is even less than Yuri. But she, don't get me wrong, she still hits dumb hard, like stupid level hard. She has a single target modifier bonus on her SA for 1 turn, so you do need to extend that, which is a bit of an issue. She does increase her own strength and earth damage by 70%. That's a crazy buff. And she removes strength buffs. Now the problem here is this skill 3, although it hits so hard, I'm pretty sure whoever you hit will not have underwear on once you hit them. The problem is she removes the buffs that she just applied herself, which makes your rotations not complicated, but it sets your rotations back. Like at a certain point there is a cutoff. Like at a certain point you have to realize when it's not worth reapplying these buffs, or when it's not worth reusing this skill or saving it, because you won't have enough turns to reapply and you'll lose out on damage in the calculations if you do calculations. I know a lot of tryhards, I'm going to air quote tryhards, because there's nothing wrong with tryharding. If you enjoy a game, play the game. I just think this complicates isn't the right word. I think this makes this an unnecessary hurdle in terms of getting the correct rotation. She is entirely single target, but she hits so hard and she has such great self-utility that she deserves to be S tier. I mean, this removing strength buffs, the difference between removing strength and magic buffs is that you are going to come against more opponents that require you to remove strength buffs than magic buffs, and this has a fast modifier on it as well. So this is why I value removing strength buffs more than removing magic buffs. I know it seems stupid, but if you look over the game, you'll see that I'm right here. You will need to remove strength buffs more than magic buffs. But yeah, no, given all of that, A tier is where I'm very comfortable putting her. And then if we come across, okay, so Lyra, where are you, girl? Here you are. Now I have Lyra MLB. Now she is a wargame unit. The thing here though is Lyra is crazy self-sufficient and has crazy utility for earth teams. So her skill, like, let's ignore the fact that she lowers magic resistance by 50% with her SA for 2 turns, right? She has a fast magic resist debuff on her skill 1 that grants additional actions. I mean, lowers agility as well, but that takes a back seat because I don't value wargame stats that highly. And then skill 2, not only does she lower magic resist, she lowers earth resist by 40% as an AoE. She also buffs her own magic. Now, buffing damage type in general in this game, I do not value that highly. If you buff your own element type and if you buff your own element type and lower resistance to elements or damage type, that is the combination I'm really looking for here. Buffing your damage type, that will happen later on anyway. We all know, I know I don't compare outside of the element, but let's be honest here, most people are going to have at least 1 copy of Haruhime. Shouldn't that be the standard? But I digress. The skill 3 has a high modifier with a 35% additional modifier on there. with an ultra crit rate. She hits so hard. The only thing she is missing from her kit is a self element buff. Put her on a team with Gareth, Alfred, you know, someone that gives her that buff. She hits really hard. Now the thing is, she doesn't hit hard enough in combination with all of this utility to just peak up to that S tier. Now we're gonna drop into S tier. You probably know who is already there. Yes, as you guessed it, the anniversary Earth Otal is king of the Earth tier list, and it's been the pattern, so to speak, for all of these tier lists, because I value utility and damage above all else, and he has both in spades, might I add. So let's come over, let's have a look at the Otal, buff him up. Got that, look at that strength stat, that's stupid. Now damn, like 2171, that's like, I mean, there are other units within the Earth tier that actually have higher stats across the rest of the board, but that strength stat is out there. Now his SA Ultra Earth has a percentage modifier on there, buffs his own strength and earth damage, and then buffs his counter rate for 1 turn. So he buffs his own strength and earth damage to 60%. No, my bad, sorry. He buffs his own counter rate by 60%. Sorry, I misread that entirely. I know what he does. I've got him MLB. I've used him several times. Sorry, he buffs his own damage by 35% for each strength and earth damage buff on him. Yo, that alone is serious damage. The counter rate I'm not too thing about, because you can increase the counter rate quite highly. You can set it with the right team, you can set it up so that they always counter regardless. I mean, and it's set to 1 turn, so yeah, it's mainly that the damage that you're looking for here, it's just crazy. Self, strength, and earth damage. So buffing his own damage type and element type by 75% for 4 turns is crazy, along with gaining 3 additional actions. Second, a fast physical resist and earth resist and guard rate debuff for 2 turns. He is such a good sack unit for every element when you're running a pure physical team, because lowering that physical resist, currently 35% is the highest physical resist debuff we have on a regular skill, and guard rate, the lowest we have, like the highest we have, is 50%, which, so he's got 2 in 1 here. Now all of that equals mad damage. This in itself is utility just beyond element type here, just by having that so many resistance debuffs and then the guard rate debuff all in one. Pure gold. And then finally we come here, and if everything else wasn't enough, he has a super modifier with a high crit rate and then lowers strength and magic by 45%. Now obviously there are other units that lower strength and magic by 45%, but none of them are DPS units. He hits crazy hard, and to think that he can provide so much utility to the point where you can use him outside of this element, it makes him king of this tier list, man. And the artwork's crazy, let's be real. Look at him abs. I wish I had abs like that. I'm joking. But yeah guys, that is going to be the tier list. If you have alternative opinions and you want to have a conversation about that, politely drop them in the comments. I'm willing to talk to everyone that has opinions on this, because that's how we grow, that's how we learn. I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're not. Social media links in the description, and as always guys, I love you and I'll catch you later.
Я понял!